I'm Rick Harp. This is your APTN News Brief for Wednesday, January 17th. We begin in Melfort, Saskatchewan, where the inquest into the attacks at James Smith Cree Nation continue. And yesterday's proceedings covered many of the painful details of that horrific incident. With more on day 2 of the inquest, Rachel May.
Today we learned the gruesome details on the day of the mass stabbing attacks on James Smith Cree Nation. The details begin with the brothers making their first stop at Damien Sanderson's house in search of his wife, Skye, who was not at home during the attacks. It ends with a grandson finding his grandfather deceased at a home in Weldon. We learned the attack started at approximately 5:40 a.m. Sunday, September 4th, with the last attack at approximately 7:10 a.m. The first emergency broadcast to alert the public about the attacks didn't go out until 7:12 a.m. During a 3-hour and 15-minute period, Miles Sanderson would use 5 different vehicles, which is one theory as to why it was so difficult to locate him. Following the final attack at 7:10 a.m., no more attacks are believed to have happened. Rachel May, APTN National News, Melfort, Saskatchewan.
The Whitehorse Correctional Centre has a history of lawsuits. Now another inmate has come forth to claim he was illegally segregated. Sarah Connors has more.
The lawyer for Norman Kindy has filed an application for a judicial review alleging his client, an Indigenous man, was illegally placed in a segregation unit. 19-year-old Norman Kindy was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Aaron Smarch last year and is awaiting trial. According to the December 28th application, a correctional officer instructed Kindy to enter his cell for lockup without the authority to do so. This led to Kindy getting into an altercation with the officer, and while entering his cell, he threw cold coffee at them. The application claims the officer retaliated by punching Kindy and placing him in several chokeholds. Kindy was transferred to the jail's arrest processing unit and then to segregation. The application states Kindy was placed in segregation out of retaliation and was not granted the required hearing before a discipline committee. Kindy's lawyer, Vincent LaRochelle, says the measures taken by the jail are problematic.
If it's feeling aggrieved by the conduct of an inmate, needs to go before an independent arbiter so that person can decide who's right, who's wrong. Is the CO right? Is the prisoner right?
LaRochelle says the jail has a track record of charter violations involving segregation. In 2019, the Supreme Court of Yukon ruled the jail's secure living units amounted to separate confinement. It also found the jail didn't have the authority to create those units. Perhaps the most well-known is a 2014 incident where Michael Niehaus, an inmate who spent years in solitary confinement, was dragged naked in front of a judge. The incident led to an independent 2018 inspection report, which recommended reforms on the jail's use of segregation. Kindy has since been placed back into general population. His lawyer says it's now up to his client to decide whether or not to push the case forward. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
And APTN did hear back from the Territory's Justice Department. The spokesperson said an internal review shows proper use of force and procedures were followed in accordance with the Corrections Act. And with a judicial review requested, the department said it would provide no further comment. To Thunder Bay, where its Police Services Board observed a moment of silence Tuesday over the deaths of 2 young Indigenous women, Mackenzie Munoz and Jenny Ostberg, cases which spark criticism of the police response. Board Chair Karen Mikado says her heart breaks for the tragic circumstances around the 2 deaths, acknowledging the criticism and lack of trust within the Indigenous community.
I echo Onwa's calls for everyone to come together to address the systemic issues that Indigenous women and their families continue to face in our city. I know Chief Fleury also supports these efforts. Once the SIU investigation into the death of Jenna Ostberg is complete, this board will work with Chief Fleury to ensure any policies and other gaps that may be identified will be addressed. We thank the SIU for sharing more details about its investigation and recent updates, given the significant community concerns.
The daughter of a woman whose remains are suspected to be in a Winnipeg area landfill has filed a pair of human rights complaints. One names the former Manitoba government of the Progressive Conservatives. The other points to that of the current NDP. Canberra Harris submitted the complaints on behalf of 3 women, her mother Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and the as yet unidentified Buffalo woman. All three are believed to be victims of an alleged serial killer. Harris has been the face of the fight to have the Prairie Green and Brady landfills searched for their remains. And in the case of the PCs, Harris's complaint cites their 2023 election campaign and its emphasis on not searching the landfills. Meanwhile, Harris asserts the current Manitoba government refuses to make funds available for a search. Minister in charge of Gender Equity, Nahanni Fontaine, claims that search remains a priority.
Our Premier, Wab Kinew, has made it explicitly clear that he, as the Premier, is committed to searching the landfill. And we have put measures in place to ensure that folks know, that families know that we are committed to that, including apologizing to the families for what the PCs did during the 2023 election and starting that relationship with the families in a good way.
As for Manitoba Premier Kinew, he recently spoke to the issue on the APTN news program Face to Face.
We invited them to the legislature, just apologize for everything that they went through. We smoked a pipe together. I want to show them that we're serious about having a culturally respectful conversation and dialogue with them. They had some tough questions. They had some, things to get off their chest, I think I can say, because everyone would, being in their situation. And so we just started it from there. And now where we're at, we're in that machinery of government. What does a budget look like? What does the process look like? How do you do the health and safety? What is the structure? All these different kind of more procedural things. And so we're still going to keep that dialogue with the families open and the Indigenous leadership. And we're going to get this thing done.
And finally, the establishment in law of a body meant to monitor federal progress on reconciliation appears imminent. And with Bill C-29 now past the House and Senate, it should get royal assent in the upcoming session. Yet as Fraser Needham reports, C-29 is not without its critics.
Carol McBride says the Native Women's Association of Canada has a lot to offer the proposed Reconciliation Council and is eager to get to work.
It's something that we advocate for every day. The safety of our women, the programs that we have in place to make sure that they are safe.
But NWAC had to lobby the government to be added to the council because initially only the Assembly of First Nations, Métis National Council, and Inuit Tapert Kanatami, or ITK, could nominate council members. ITK withdrew because it says Bill C-29 does little to make the federal government fulfill its obligations to reconciliation. As well, the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, or CAP, has also been left off the council. APTN News asked McBride whether CAP should be added.
Well, I think any way that we can get the picture of the issues across the country, from across the country, is definitely a plus for our people.
It doesn't get much better when it comes to outside assessment of Bill C-29. A new report by the Toronto-based Yellowhead Institute says the government has yet to meet any of the Truth and Reconciliation's 94 calls to action, except it is close to completing Action 53, creating a National Council for Reconciliation.
But when it comes to the other substantive calls to action, particularly calls to action around child welfare, education, justice, languages, I think it's quite clear that they haven't actually completed those specific calls.
And without adequate funding and the ability to access all the government documents it requires, he says the council won't be effective either.
The Senate Standing Committee on Indigenous Affairs did call for funding comparable with the Aboriginal Healing Fund as sort of a benchmark. If that were the case, I think that could create a stable long-term funding model. It's possible. And they did add in language to the bill that allows the council to use the courts. I don't think that's sufficient. I think there should be subpoena powers provided to the council, but there's a possibility that it'll be effective.
APTN reached out to Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Gary-Ann Desandegre about concerns raised in the Yellowhead report. In an emailed statement, his office says, once Bill C-29 becomes law, it will fulfill TRC calls to action 53 to 56. It also says an investment of $125 million is substantial, and funding may increase as demands evolve. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
And that's your APTN News Brief for Wednesday, January 17th. I'm Rick Harp.